folks still will be joining us, but I thought we could go ahead and get started. And so thank you to everybody for joining us today. It's great to see you, everyone. This is our first Catalyst seminar of the 2016-2017 academic year. And this year we're going to continue a theme that we started last year, which we call A Conversation About. And our goal is to invite a community of folks who are interested in innovation and entrepreneurship to come together and talk about various topics of interest. And we want to kind of facilitate that by inviting somebody external to UNH to come and talk about questions that they think about, or challenges or obstacles or successes that they see, and to partner that with somebody from within UNH who has related interests and perhaps is doing research in that area or facilitating services or networking or connections. And to have, to hear from each of those entities and then to open up a conversation about mutual points of interest, or how do ideas flow back and forth, and how do we communicate and network those. So we have a fantastic seminar today to get us kicked off for the year. But before I do those introductions, I'll briefly tell you about the lineup we have for the fall. So next month, October 22nd, we're going to be hearing from EMSL Analytical, Where's Jared, who will be talking to us with Sean Banker, who's the director of the University Instrumentation Center. And they'll be talking about, we have two things we just discussed, but in essence, what are some of the nimble ways that a company might think about expanding its capabilities, and the questions about the investment that you might make internally, the relationships you make externally, and that balance. And then Sean will represent from the university's interest what it means to have those types of relationships and to be building those networks as well as developing capabilities internally as a result. In November, on the 17th, we have Craig Morris joining us, and Craig is the managing attorney for trademark educational outreach with the USPTO. And he's going to come and talk to us about trademark fundamentals, but how it relates to starting companies that are starting up, how to think about using trademarks as an asset and what you might need to do to protect them, as well as some of the flexibility that you have in using these as an asset. And then on December 15th, our conversation about is networking. So that is our annual event where we won't have any formal presentations or speakers, but just a chance to come together and enjoy some appetizers and some beverages and lots of great conversations. And later in the semester, we'll tell you about the lineup for the spring, but I'm very excited about the start that we have. So a few additional words. Following today's presentation, please stay and join us for networking. Hopefully you saw that there is some food and some beverages. And if you get hungry or thirsty throughout, you are welcome to go and help yourself and just come back and join us. I think I'm safe in saying to this crowd, enjoy the beer, but if you're not 21, don't. You're exactly right. I have my eye on. And then our gold sponsor for this year's seminar is Finch & Maloney, and I wanted to give them a special shout out and appreciation. They are a Manchester-based law firm that provides IP counseling for technology companies. So, finally, moving on to the real business of the day. Our conversation today will be about entrepreneurship, economic revitalization, and community design. And we often hear one side of the story when entrepreneurs are starting up or looking for a place to get connected, and they look to see an environment where there might already be existing infrastructure or peers to collaborate with. And today we can flip that conversation a bit and look at the question about what happens when you get entrepreneurs involved in a process when community is looking at what next. And so we're going to be hearing about a creative process used to revitalize a downtown, which is in Franklin, New Hampshire, and entails entrepreneurial voice and economic development opportunities. And so this story is going to be shared with us from a number of thought leaders that are really engaged and committed to Franklin's revitalization design. So joining us from Franklin, I'll point to small pictures here on the screen. We have George, who's a member of Franklin City's Council and co-chair of the Choose Franklin Advisory Board, and that was founded in 2004. And Elizabeth Dragon, Franklin's city manager, who began her tenure in 2008 and has brought a number of positive changes to the city. And I'm hopeful that they will further expand on their roles within Franklin as well as within this process and can give more detail there. And then from UNH, we have Charlie French, who is UNH Cooperative Extension's Community and Economic Development Program Leader. And he was one of the team members for facilitating this unique community process. And so we have time built in during the presentation for questions as well as time at the end. We hope to make this a dynamic conversation as they share this story with us. So thank you to everybody for their participation today.
Thank you, Maria. As Maria said, I want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions of me and of our guest speakers, by all means, we'd love you to interact. George and Elizabeth, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we can hear you too. So if folks have questions, I'll just repeat the question just to make sure you get it. But thank you again for joining us. It's great to have you. So I'll just kick this off a little bit. We're really going to be talking about renewal and revitalization of Franklin, New Hampshire. How many of you have been to Franklin, New Hampshire? So what are your impressions of Franklin? What is Franklin like to you?
There's an ash landfill there that I have studied before.
Okay, an ash landfill. All right, I didn't know that. Yeah, I missed that on my tour. So yeah. What else? So. Fly fishing, yeah. It's at Franklin is at the convergence of three rivers. So it's actually at the Pemigewasset, the Winnipesaukee, and the Merrimack. Is that correct?
That's
correct.
All right,
And they stock them rivers well, too.
All right. That's hopefully they're going to be stocked for the fall. I'll be up there. What other impressions do you have of Franklin? So. All right. Well, we'll talk about Franklin. It's a city with some challenges, and if you've driven through it, you've probably seen some of the challenges. But it's also a city with a lot of opportunities too. When we talk about innovation, and innovation is kind of the theme that runs through all the Catalyst seminars. I'm trained as a social scientist, and we often don't think of ourselves as innovators. But in some respects, social scientists can be just as innovative as physical scientists and others. We may not be inventing the next breakthrough technology, but we are implementing new tools and techniques in communities that can get people engaged, that can get people mobilized around common actions. So that's one of the innovation fronts that we'll be talking about is we've got a town with some challenges and opportunities. The question is, how do you engage the broader public to actually create a common vision, set some common goals, and actually do something to make some changes around that? And then I'm going to, after I talk about that a little bit, I'm going to turn to Elizabeth and George, and they're going to talk about some of the things that have happened in Franklin in the last year or two, because there's really some exciting things that have happened. I want to give you a little bit of context for Franklin. If you've never been there, it's not far. It's a little bit north of Concord, probably about 20 minutes north of Concord. It's just off of I-93. It's about a 10-minute drive off of 93 to get into the downtown corridor. It's the home of Daniel Webster, the great statesman and the lawyer, and it's also, as we talked about, it's the home of that's where three rivers converge together. But Franklin also has a number of challenges, and we'll kind of talk about some of those a little bit. As you can see, Franklin as a post-industrial mill town where you had grist mills, you had cloth mills, and a sawmill, which its industry was based on this in the 1800s. Many of these mills have since closed. All of the mills have closed. And if you go through Franklin, you'll see a lot of vacant buildings, boarded up buildings. And so it's created a little bit of challenge for the town, for the city. Also, it's a city with some socioeconomic challenges. There's some issues with poverty, employment. The opioid crisis has hit Franklin, and Elizabeth might be able to talk about that. She's actually chair of the city's, the mayor's task force on the drug task force. So it's got that challenge. It's got infrastructure challenges. It doesn't have great connectivity to broadband internet, not great cellular coverage. And if you're a millennial and you're thinking about the next place where you're going to want to live, you're not going to go to places where you don't have good connectivity. So these are some of the challenges. Also, there's a tax cap in the town. So while the city may want to do some things, they're limited by what they're able to collect in tax revenue to be able to make some of those things happen. And there's some, there's difficulty in collecting taxes from people who owe taxes. So there are a lot of challenges. But on the flip side of it, there are a lot of opportunities in the city of Franklin.
Charlie, is the tax cap something that gets set by the city itself? Like
I'll turn to Elizabeth. Is the tax cap set by the city?
Yeah, it was put in place by the voters. And, I hear there's a lot of conversation about the tax cap and the pros and cons of having a tax cap. And I will tell you that whether you have a tax cap or not, you have to have the ability to collect taxes. And if you have a community that doesn't have the ability to pay, you're not raising your budget and your taxes, is not going to help the situation. This past tax deeding year, we took 18 properties was on the tax deeding list, and it's a problem for us. And I think each year I've seen the number of properties that people are losing increase, and that becomes something that we need to deal with. So the debate is, do you raise taxes even if the voters were interested in exceeding the tax cap? Is there the capacity to pay for it?
Yep. So talking about some of the challenges, if you drive through Franklin, you'll see some amazing architecture. This is Toad Hall. This is one of the cooler buildings in the downtown, and it's turned into an art space. It also has, I don't know how many mill buildings, but there are a lot of mill buildings that are along the river. And it's got really strong leadership. I think, Elizabeth, you've been there since 2008, and you've really instituted some really positive changes in the community. There's also really strong local organizations. George is involved with Choose Franklin, which is an organization really promoting Franklin. Entrepreneurs, there are a number of really progressive entrepreneurs. One of them, I believe, owns this space. Is that correct? Toad Hall is owned by a gentleman.
By Permis City Life, which is a nonprofit.
Yep. So it's got incredible assets, organizations, and it's got the 3 rivers that come together. It's got parks and public spaces. So there's a lot to work with. And it's an affordable place, well, depending on whose perspective you're coming from, but it could be an affordable place to live if they can generate some housing and other opportunities in the community. So it's got a lot to work with. I want to talk about innovation in terms of the approaches that we used with Cooperative Extension to engage the broader public in sort of crafting a vision for where they want to go and mobilizing people to actually do something around that vision. Let's face it, how many of you go to town meeting? A couple of you do. Most of you probably. It's something that a lot of people just, it's not what you think of as what you want to do on an evening. Some of these town meetings can go on and on. So I would pose the question, is town meeting the most effective way to make things happen and to make important decisions in a community? For some decisions, it may be necessary, but I think that there are other innovative ways to engage people. The reality is that when you have a town meeting or a public hearing, it's 1% of the community or less that actually comes out to those venues. So it's really hard to get buy-in and an understanding of what's happening in the community if you're only targeting 1% or less of the people. So we absolutely have to be thinking about new ways to be engaging people in community life. And the public forum and the public meeting is not necessarily the only way that we should be turning to. So I'll be talking about that. So that really gets to leadership. It's not just the municipal leadership, like Elizabeth, whose job is to make things happen in the community, but it's about civic leadership. It's about getting people who may not be involved in community life, get them engaged around things, get the entrepreneurs out. And we used to have a joke that when we do a community forum, that the smartest people in the community, the entrepreneurs, don't show up. And it's usually true. They're not the ones who go to community forums. So how do you get hold of them? So we worked with the city of Franklin and with Elizabeth and George, and we wrote a grant proposal to the National Endowment for the Arts. They have a program called the Citizens Institute for Rural Design, and it's exactly what it says. It's about how do you recreate and redesign and renew communities in a way that engages the broader public. And we were fortunate enough to get the grant. It wasn't a large grant, but it was enough to just get us moving and to seed some activity. And through that grant, we were able to institute a whole number of different ways to engage the public. And I'll just talk briefly about some of those ways. The first technique that we used is called storytelling. And this is something that we learned about from the Orton Family Foundation. And the idea is that you have people in the community with rich histories, rich knowledge, and rich stories about that community, and with passion about something in that community. And in order to make good things happen and determine where all the overlapping circles of interest are, you have to be able to capture what those stories are. So we did an exercise called Franklin Voices, where we had a number of volunteers that went out and interviewed various people from the community to capture their stories. And we came up with this really powerful compilation of stories. And when you read through that compilation, you suddenly realize, well, there's some really common things that people are looking for. And if our goal is to make Franklin a vibrant place for everybody, there's some common ways that you can sort of identify in that storytelling to make that happen. We also had this notion that you need to engage people where they're at. You can't just invite someone to come to your community forum. If you want to engage people, you got to go to their territory. So we had volunteers visiting nursing homes and finding out what the seniors who may have lived in that community for 70, 80, 90 years, what is their recollection of the town? How has it changed? And what would they like to see happen? We went into the schools, and we had incredible engagement with the schools to find out what the kids who are going to be hopefully the future of this city, what they wanted for their future. So there was a lot of engagement with the schools. We did another thing, this picture in the middle, it's called a sticky note flash mob. So you take a building in your downtown area, and the building may be vacant, underutilized, or unutilized, and it's a way to collect input from the community. You pose a question on that building, and you put a bunch of sticky notes out there and say the question could be, if this space were available for anyone to create an entrepreneurial venture, what would you use it for? And then people start to put their ideas on there, and then they can group those ideas together. And it's unbelievable how much input you can collect in that way, and it really gets people engaged. Sometimes you see 20 or 30 people sort of huddled around this building, like putting their ideas down there. So it's a creative way that we can also capture and harness to provide one other way of collecting that public input. We did hold a community forum where we invited everybody together to take this Franklin Voices, the storytelling exercise, all the interviews that we had with different groups at the nursing home, at the school, the sticky note activity, and we sort of presented all this back to the community. And we had some speakers that talked about ways of revitalizing the community. But what we wanted to make this was something that was interactive, where the community could sort of share their own ideas. And we had a process whereby we sort of narrowed down through a consensus building process what were 3 or 4 or 5 things that people really wanted to do and get traction on. And we were able to identify what those were. And then I think the last creative piece, and we'll show you some of the images from this, we did a design charrette. There's an organization called Plan New Hampshire, and it's a group of architects and engineers that they go around to cities and towns, and they're looking for ways to hear what the public wants in terms of what their vision for the community is, and they actually create some architectural and engineering renderings of what that community could look like. And that was a really powerful tool to unleash people's ideas of what Franklin could be in the future. And it gave people hope that they have a lot of assets that really could be turned around.
Charlie?
George, please.
On that design charrette that you're talking about, the most powerful thing that happened about that was that it came from the people. It came from the people that they, when we had our Franklin Voices, all of their ideas were put into it. It wasn't just somebody coming in doing a charrette for us saying, to make your town look better, to make your town great, you have to put this over here. It was something that the people wanted. And I think that that's why it was such a success, that whole 3-day workshop.
I agree. I mean, these images that I'll be showing you were the community's vision turned into a rendering by an architect. And they were interacting as the architects and the engineers were drawing it out. And it was a really cool process to see. It was very powerful because you can actually see these things fleshed out. So this is one of the images. One of the goals of the people that we heard over and over again through all these ways of engaging the public, where we want Franklin to be a place where people can bump elbows. People can meet each other on the street, share ideas, connect, and build that social capital. And so this is sort of something that shows you restaurants on the street, that shows you a vibrant place where you can actually cross the street without getting hit by a car because there's a nice crosswalk there. So this is, there's a restaurant there. So this is all about the social meeting places that you can build in a community. And they have buildings that there's potential to do something like this. The river. The river is an unbelievable resource in the community. 3 rivers coming together. And there's a lot of public space along these rivers. And there are a lot of mill buildings that if you could utilize these mill buildings for housing or businesses, it poses a lot of potential. And you could actually have the river become a center of activity for the community, a place. Right now, I think it's changing. If you were looking at Franklin a couple years ago, the river was probably not a place where a lot of people went, but it's starting to become sort of a hub or a centerpiece for the community. And I would also note that I don't want to steal your thunder, Elizabeth and George, but there's a kayak outfitter that started up subsequent to this process. So. And then another opportunity, I'm sure Elizabeth and George can talk about it, is you have all of these buildings and you have a lack of housing, particularly for the senior population and for middle-income working families. So is there a possibility to take all of these buildings and turn it into a place where people can reside and live in close quarters to the downtown? So George and Elizabeth, I think if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it over to you to talk about some of the things that have happened in Franklin.
Sure. Thank you very much. Again, you know, what you hit on is the people that actually gave the input for this whole project was just amazing. And maybe I can just talk about some of the outcomes that came because of that.
Can I talk a
Sure.
little bit about the process
Sure.
first? I just want to talk a little bit more about the process first, because I have been in town administration for 18 years, 8 of which has been here in Franklin. And I've participated in many different charrette processes throughout the years. And one of the things that I said when UNH approached us about applying for this grant was, sure, this sounds like a great idea, but I want to make sure that we have action items at the end of this plan. I do not want another plan that's just going to sit on the shelf. I think we've all experienced that at one time or another in our careers. And so we wanted to make sure that the end product had things that we could accomplish in phases, and that we would have some low-hanging fruit to build success upon. And so we were able to do that. And also, as part of the process, once we were awarded the grant, we created a steering committee, and the steering committee was made up from different members of, some members of local government, but some members of organizations in the community as well. And really that steering committee was essential to our success because they actually did the majority of the work. They are the ones that organized all of these different events with the help of UNH, of course, because they were our facilitators throughout the entire project. But the people that volunteered went out and held these voices, these storytelling circles, and participated and even got donations for the food, because we know if you have food, people will come to a meeting. It's very important, but usually grants don't pay for that. And so we got donations from different organizations, and it was our volunteers that really made it happen. So at the end of the process, we did end up with a product that was driven by the members of the community. And we were able to go out and reach people who might not come to a meeting. I mean, we have a city council meeting and we're lucky if there's 20 people that attend, unless they're very angry about something, and then you can fill the room. But most of the time, it's about 10, 15, 20 people tops that come to our monthly meetings. And they really don't know all of the things that's happening in the community. So by using this engagement process, we were able to go to them. We had volunteers that went to the senior housing. We had volunteers that went into the schools. We had very powerful pictures that came back from the students themselves about how they saw Franklin, what were their most favorite things about Franklin. And I have to just share one story real quick about that. One of the pictures that came back, I think, George, you coordinated this effort.
With the second grade?
The second graders drew these pictures. And I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, but their picture was about Cumberland Farms. and it was because that was where they were getting their food. And that was very powerful to us because it told us that we need to find ways to bring good, healthy food choices and to the downtown area because transportation is an issue. And so really those pictures and that engagement process told us a lot. And just to back up, before we did this grant, we had been working on different economic development initiatives, and the council had really done, I think, all that they could do in terms of getting the tools ready for economic development. They had adopted 2 tax increment financing districts, one in our industrial park and one in our downtown. They had adopted an economic development zone up in the industrial park. They adopted 79E, which gave tax breaks for people making improvements on their buildings in the downtown area. They really had set the stage, but we just didn't have quite the momentum yet going. And around that time that this charrette process was being planned, we had someone, an entrepreneur who was interested in doing something in downtown Franklin, but was sort of struggling with how to get from point A to point B. And one of the things you learn in this process is that if you want economic development to happen, you really have to make sure that your community is giving the image that they are open for business. Now, that does not mean that you're going to write a blank check and you're going to give an entrepreneur everything that they want to make it happen, but that you are going to help them through the process, that your procedures and your regulations aren't difficult to get through. And these are some of the things that we talked about. When we did this project, we looked at creating a community that was good for all ages, a home for all ages, not just for our senior population. We know we have an aging population, but good for the baby boomers as well. And when we did that, we found out they actually had a lot in common. A lot of the things that the baby boomers are interested in, the seniors are also interested in terms of being close to downtown and relying more on public transportation or things within walking distance. So we learned a great deal through the process, and really I think we focused on making sure that at the end of the process we had something that we could actually tackle and do. And one of the things that we focused on was creating these subcommittees. And Councilor DeJuner here led the volunteer subcommittee, and they did great things, and I'll let him talk about some of the things they did in their committee.
And again, like Elizabeth said, we had 5 committees that came out of this. It was volunteerism, volunteer committee. It was recreation and community events, which has a meeting tonight at 5:15. I'm sorry, the arts and culture has a meeting at 5:15. We had a challenge about, especially not having a paper. So Elizabeth came up with an idea about doing a city newsletter. But what we needed to do, because I don't know how your town is or your city is, but I found there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of misinformation. And maybe that's what I should use. So with our newsletter, we had a woman, Elaine Romano, that just retired from Eversource, and she took over the job, and she's been doing a great job because she gets the information direct from the horse's mouth and gets it on paper. Okay, that is one of the committees that came about this, and also our economic and housing and economic development committee. Okay, so out of these 5 committees, especially the volunteer committee, my time was starting to be used up. So I asked my wife, Christine, if she could take the bull by the horns and take it over. And she's been doing a great job for the last year. We have maybe about 15 or 20 people that meet on a regular basis one of the problems that we have, and this is another challenge that we have to get over, most of them volunteers are not baby boomers, okay? They're senior citizens. Everybody wants to do something, but physically they can only go so far. So our challenge, or the challenge for the volunteer committee now, is to try to get as many young people as possible. And it's been working, and I've got to just tell you, our organization, Choose Franklin, this is the first time we had a full board since I've been involved, and I've been involved since I moved here about 10 years ago. This is the first time we have a full board, and out of that full board, there's 5 people that are 40 and under. So that's quite an accomplishment for us.
I'm talking about things. So as part of the
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
As part of the process, some of the action items included things like creating a gathering place for people and looking at having a place for people to sit down at different areas in the downtown area, because it would create an opportunity for them to have a cup of coffee and a conversation like Charlie was talking about earlier. And through the volunteer committee, they actually took on, we called it the Franklin Great Bench Project.
Bench Project.
Yeah.
Actually, it was a person that came to us, gave us anonymous gift, but this person wanted to get the high school kids, the juniors and seniors involved, and the community. So she gave a gift of first, second, and third prize. It was 500, I think 300 and 200, and that prize, if the high school kids won it, the junior class won it, it would go for their class trips or whatever. But they had a design. They had to come up with 5 different designs, and then we, Choose Franklin, we kind of oversaw it to make sure the designs were pretty.
So you're seeing up on the screen one of the benches that was created and is sitting in front of the Franklin Studio, which is a little coffee shop downtown. And that is another business that popped up after this Franklin for a Lifetime event. This is actually run, this coffee shop is run all by volunteers. They don't get a paycheck. Their interest was they participated in the Franklin for a Lifetime project, the charrette process, and they really wanted to do something to help fill the empty buildings in the downtown. And so
what they did a tremendous job of revitalizing that whole inside, and they took it over. They have coffee and pastries, but they took over the other half of the building, and they have all New Hampshire made products in there that they sell, and they're doing great.
They're doing very well. And so, some of the other things that have come about, I think Charlie sort of referenced it. In Franklin, we have an abundance of affordable housing. The problem is the majority of that affordable housing is not good quality that anyone would really want to live in. And so through this process, we partnered with Catch Housing, which is a community housing program. And they are in the process of turning that mill right there into 45 units. It's of affordable housing. It's a $12 million project, and this project is very near and dear to my heart because it's behind the parking lot where I pull in every day. And I've looked at those boarded up windows the 8 years that I've been here. And we've tried several different things to make that building a success. The problem that we've had is that the numbers don't work. For a typical entrepreneur wanting to take over a building like that, the costs exceed the profit, and the payback period just doesn't make sense. So it had to be something creative. And of course, you don't just want anything, you want something that solves another problem. And so by having this affordable housing project go in there, and Catch actually participated in our Planning charrette, our Director of Planning and Zoning, Dick Lewis, is on the Catch Housing Board, and a group called Perma-City Life, which we haven't really talked about yet, but they also were part of this deal with Catch Housing. And Perma-City Life, which really was begun by a gentleman named Todd Workman, and you've read some stories about some of the work that he's been doing here, but I don't know, 2, 3, maybe it's been 3 or more years now. Todd came into the community, and I mentioned briefly before, he was interested in doing something, but he really honestly had unrealistic expectations in terms of what the city could and could not do. I mean, we couldn't devote our staff to writing grants for him. We couldn't, forgive taxes. There are things legally we couldn't do and things logistically we couldn't do. But there are things that the city can do to partner and create this private-public partnership. And for us, this Franklin for a Lifetime event, this process that we went through, really helped get us on the right track with Perma-City Life. It was a bit of a turning point. Before that, we were having conversations with Todd, and this was before the nonprofit was created for Perma-City Life. And he was just very frustrated with us. He really, when I would say we can't do that, he just thought that I was putting up a stone wall to make it difficult for him. And it was very difficult for us to get past that. But when we had the speakers, and we selected the speakers as part of the steering committee, and we had a reason for the selection of the speakers, but when we selected the speakers to come in who have done some successful projects in other communities, Todd and others that had been working with him were in the room, and they were able to ask questions directly of these developers. And really, I think it was then that he got a good understanding of what was realistic for a town or city to do. And since then, we've really been working together and doing great things. Yeah. And there's been huge momentum since then. I see up in the corner on your screen, you see One Kayaking, which is it's Outdoor New England. And what we're working on right now, Marty is the owner of Outdoor New England, and he's partnered up with Perma-City Life, and he's partnered up with the city, because we have these wonderful rivers, and we have a lake, and we have a local ski area that I don't think many people know about. But because we have these rivers, it's a wonderful opportunity, and the rivers run through downtown. Perfect for us in terms of revitalizing the downtown. Marty came in to see me, and he was interested in doing something with the rivers. At first, I matched him up with our Park and Rec director to see if there was some programs that he might be able to offer on the lake and on the rivers through our summer camp program, and then matched him up with Todd Workman at Perma-City Life. And he's really been working with Perma-City Life since then, and they've done crowdsourcing funding and raised money now for the preliminary plans to create a whitewater park in downtown Franklin. Can you believe that? A whitewater park. Now, why would we want a whitewater park? Well, because it brings tourism and indirect spending, which would then support these businesses that we're working so hard to open in the downtown area. And it's also very unique. You'd have to go quite a ways to go whitewater rafting, and Marty has other things that he's offering in terms of biking. We have bike trails that come right through the community as well. And so it's a great opportunity for us, and we have found ways to partner with them. Yesterday, I participated in a phone call with the engineer that's coming in that's looking at the preliminary design for the first phase of the project. And we hope to, see the first phase of the project over the next year or so, and then to phase in until 1.2 miles of the river is part of this whitewater park. And Marty, through volunteerism and working through Perma-City Life, has opened up a little shop in the downtown, and you see it, I think him standing right in front of it. And that building, I can't even remember how many pounds of debris they took out of it, but volunteers went in and they took it out, all of the debris, and they've opened up. And Marty is still working a full-time job, but he's doing this and he's making great progress, and we're very excited. And I think what happens is it's sort of the rising tide. As soon as we were able to get past that barrier and start to show that, you know, there were ways that people could work together with the community and that there were ways that volunteers could help to make projects happen. We have a lot of people in the community who are very interested in seeing good things happen, and they're donating time and money to make it happen.
And you know, just talking about this kayak one, a whitewater park in Franklin would be great. There's towns and cities out west that were smaller than ours, but they had a river running through it, and now they're viable. They have 20,000 people visiting them a year to do whitewater rafting. And it can be done because it's all how they engineer, how they place the rocks in the river. Our river, when it's flowing, it's probably a class, we can reach up to a class 4 whitewater river, and which is pretty good when you think about there's 5 classes in whitewater rafting.
And we had already been doing whitewater rafting on January 1st of every year. Choose Franklin, which is sort of like our downtown Main Street organization, had been hosting the first day, which is like an icicle run, basically, down the river. And we have been drawing in people from all over. I actually think that's how Marty found us to begin with.
It certainly was. Yeah. That's how Marty found us. And we, this past New Year's Day, we had 250 people standing on the our bridge watching the rafters, the whitewater kayakers come down. And they come from all over. I've talked to people from Canada. I've talked to people from Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island. Some people came from out west. They were visiting people. They heard about it and they wanted to come and see what it's all about. So
I just want to, go ahead. I just want to make sure that the folks in the audience have a chance to ask some questions.
Oh, sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But one thing that we're blessed with here is that we get 22,000 cars a day coming down our Central Street. We got to find a way to have them cars stop.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to give another sort of concrete example of how communities can partner with organizations. What are realistic expectations? So Toad Hall, which you saw a picture of earlier, along that side of the street, there are several buildings that Perma City Life worked to purchase under their nonprofit. But one of the buildings had some housing, or a few of them have housing on the upper level, which is very common in downtown areas. But they didn't have parking, and so the only people that were being attracted to those units were people who didn't have jobs and they didn't have cars. And so obviously it was in our best interest to see that change, and Perma City Life was looking to change the quality of housing above those buildings as well. And so they partnered with the city to get the parking that was needed. And that's just one example, but we also have an organization called FBIDC, which is our Economic Development Organization. George is on the board, I'm on the board. And FBIDC has been partnering with, and actually is the fiscal agent for Perma City Life, which is a nonprofit, through our Economic Development Organization. And that's just another way. I think if people have to get creative. These solutions are not easy, and it does require thinking outside of the box.
I know you want to leave time for a question, but I just wanted to say one thing about our businesses downtown. We have 2 young ladies. They opened up Ralph and Joe's about 4 years ago. And it was just a small breakfast and lunch place, and they did very well. After this, and also there's a fellow that opened up Central Sweets, and it was a small candy shop. But after this project, the Franklin for a Lifetime project, they saw the value. What they did is they took the building next to them, made their restaurant bigger, more seating. They took the original restaurant, they made a pantry out of it where people can come in, buy food, where they could, it's partially prepared where they can bring it home and finish the preparing themselves, for dinners or lunches or whatever. And they have a pantry and a bar sandwich on that side, and they expanded their lunch. And Central Suites, what he did was he invested in refrigeration, brought in ice cream, brought in countertops, tables, and he does not only candy, he does ice creams, sodas, other novelties like that. And he has a little business set up where he does birthday parties for families.
So I just want to tie that back into what can the city do to help make those things happen. One, I'm pretty proud of the fact that we process permits very quickly. I mean, one of the quickest, I think, communities we process our permits, and that's important because time is money. The other thing is that we loosened up a lot of our regulations. There's a lot of seating now on right outside of the businesses, which really are technically on city property. One of the businesses, they're looking at it, doing a restaurant and expanding into the city park, and this again is through Perma City Life, and they would need some of the park in order to do that, and so we're working on an arrangement between the city and the organization so that they are successful at doing that, because we know that we have to create a place for people, a place that has identity, a place that people want to come to and enjoy their time here. And so we're working really hard to do that. And this process helped us bring all the players together and really get some momentum behind some of the initiatives.
Well, this
And
is
when you look at that charrette that was made up by Plan New Hampshire, in the back where it has all the proposed things, we probably have 80% of them.
Yeah, we have almost all of those initiatives
done
from a year ago. All those action items are almost complete.
Okay, this is a good segue. We're going to engage the participants now. Thank you guys. A lot of great things happening in Franklin. It's really exciting to see the changes. Want to open it up for you folks to ask questions, comments. Yes, yeah.
So to the extent that you're not the only rundown city on a really neat waterfront, have you looked across the country or in Europe for that matter for best practices on the types of infrastructure and ways to finance it?
So I'm not sure if you heard that, but since Franklin's not the only city on the waterway, do you know of other places?
So you don't recreate the wheel if you don't have to. And when I first came here, I toured Claremont and other mill communities that have been successful in some redevelopment of their mill buildings. And we tried doing it the way that they did it. I did put in place a couple of things Claremont did, make one-stop shopping for an entrepreneur. In Claremont, you can go and get your building permit and see planning and zoning and economic development all in one building. And I did make that change a few years ago here. But the projects and how their projects happened, the numbers just did not still work for us. But yes, we definitely have looked at other communities, and we honestly don't need jobs. We have probably more jobs than we have for people to fill those jobs. What we need is our downtown to be alive and vibrant, and we need the tourism piece to support those businesses so that we can build our tax base and keep that tax base.
Great, thank you. Other questions, thoughts, experiences in your own community? Kevin.
My impression was that there was unemployment, but maybe I was off, because I was wondering, the question I was going to ask was related to whether you saw unemployed people as a resource could be used. So I heard a lot about volunteers, and maybe that was incorrect.
Yeah.
So I'll just talk a little bit about, it's not really, unemployment is not an issue. If we go to our business park, they're hiring right now. They're hiring lots of people, but the problem we have, and I think this is not unique to us, is that there are people that cannot pass a drug test. And so many of these jobs require you to pass a drug test. And so we don't have an issue with jobs. We have more jobs than we can fill. We do have, however, an issue with people able to pass a drug test. And I think, again, that's not just a Franklin issue. That is definitely an issue nationwide, and definitely the heroin epidemic is really beating us up in New Hampshire, and we do have a drug task force that is based on prevention to try and address those issues, but we've tied our schools to manufacturing. We've got a program that's starting to attract people to the students, because not everyone goes on to college, you know, and so sometimes they don't think of manufacturing as a good job, a good paying job, and manufacturing has really changed over the years.
Watts Water Technology has had a sign up there for about 3.5 years now,
Yeah.
you know, looking for people. Their average pay is around $18 an hour.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is manufacturing. You know, I spent 30 years in manufacturing. It's completely different than when I was in it, because it's all computerized now. And that's where the challenge is, to find people to, you know, to cover these jobs.
Maria.
I'm curious how your relationship began between Cooperative Extension and Franklin, and what were you each hoping to get out of it in the beginning?
I didn't catch that.
Our relationship with UNH?
Yeah, so I guess the question is, how did the relationship begin between
Sure.
us, and what were we
Yeah.
looking to get out of it? I can say
Okay.
that I first saw this proposal by the Citizens Institute for Rural Design, and I said, wow, there's got to be communities in New Hampshire that have incredible potential, but just have some challenges that if we could just pull people together. So we started looking at the demographics, and sort of, we said, Franklin, that's geography, the rivers, you had all the assets. And so I believe that, Elizabeth, we reached out to you. And,
You did, yeah. Yeah, you did reach out to me, and I think I mentioned earlier, at first I was a little hesitant because it sounded like a charrette process, but it really wasn't. It was a lot more than that. And I think, you know, we worked together to make it what we needed in the community. So we took the funds that were available, and originally it was more about aging in place. And we tied in, it's not aging in place, it's creating a place, and a place for all ages. And so we were able to really make it our own and make it, you know, what works for Franklin, the process.
I can maybe just talk a little bit about what the New Hampshire Cooperative Extension did for me personally, being a member of that steering committee. When the ladies came in and taught us how to facilitate these different groups that we were going to go out to talk to. I was in sales for 14 years, so I was a good listener, but sometimes I get too riled up and I don't let people talk. And so they kind of helped us quite a bit with that.
Facilitation, definitely, yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, I think we're about at the end of our hour, so Maria, I guess I would turn it over to you to close.
Well,
So.
I want to say,
Hey, Charlie?
Yes.
Can I make one more plug for the UNH Cooperative Extension?
Thank you. Sure.
The project has been over for over a year. The grant money has been gone for over a year. UNH Cooperative Extension still participates with us. They still help us facilitate our meetings. We still meet quarterly with our groups. And so I just want to give a big thanks to UNH Cooperative Extension.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys. Much appreciated.
a great way to end this. So
I just want to say thank you.
I just want to say thank you
to everybody for
your participation and putting together this presentation.
When I think about it for the larger
discussions that we've been having here over 5 years, some of the key themes that I heard was flexibility, partnership, and I think that translates so readily. Talking about our research programs or university or commercialization opportunities or entrepreneurship outside of it.
I really do thank you for your time.
Starting us off this year
on absolutely the right.
So for those of us who are not zooming in, we're going to move out to the other room for the networking period. Thank you all for attending. And many thanks to our speakers.
Thank you.
Happy fall.